Hello and welcome to the Bulletin with UBS on Monocle Radio. Each week, the sharpest minds and freshest thinkers in finance take you beyond the numbers and hype, right to the heart of the big issues of the day. Today, we have the first of two very special editions of the programme for you. The theme for these programmes is investing in women, breaking barriers in economics and empowering financial futures for all. Regular listeners to this show will know about UBS's interest in showcasing wisdom to effect change, and they will also be familiar with our previous focus on this programme on the bank's Nobel perspectives and how the insights of that extraordinary cohort of thinkers and doers shapes the UBS worldview. Well, we are in the incredibly fortunate position of hearing from one such Nobel laureate today.
I was depicted by the Nobel Committee as a historical detective, and that really is the way I think of my work.
That's Claudia Goldin, just the third woman to win the Nobel Prize for Economic Sciences and the first to claim the award solo, largely for her work on female participation in the economy. Goldin's landmark 1990 book, Understanding the Gender Gap, An Economic History of American Women, laid the foundations for a radical rethink of the way the US views women's employment. Now, thanks to a partnership between UBS and Monocle's sister publication Konfekt, the winter edition of which is out now, you can read more about Goldin's work and passion for identifying and advocating solutions for a more equitable future. In this week's special edition of this programme, we're delighted to bring you some insights from Goldin herself on the importance of fostering economic equality. So, here is Claudia Goldin with more on her work and her journey.
When we usually think about the gender gap today, we think about earnings. The book, Understanding the Gender Gap, was written to set down the history of women in the labor force. So in that sense, the gender gap of the title is not so much about earnings as it is about labor force participation. If you look back to 1900, a very, very small fraction of women are in the labor force, let's say 5%. But today it's, let's say, 70%. Well, that's a huge change. I knew that I was doing something extremely important. But at the same time, I thought, how is it possible that if I look back to 1900, people were poor? Surely women were employed for more than that. So I started thinking about the fact that there was a vast undercount of employment and that I should go and put people back into the labor force, even though they didn't say that they had an occupation. It was even more interesting because it wasn't as if the data that we had were telling us the truth about what happened to women in the labor force. The major challenges for women are often the same over time. They're still the major caregivers, and so the challenges are combining career and family. At some point in the past, it would have been combining a job and a family, or combining work at all in a family. Some other challenges that are even more important today concern the challenges of being a single mom.
Goldin is at pains to point out the critical importance of education and access to it in shaping the experience of women.
Education, first and foremost, gives you the skills, imparts to you. Hopefully, you absorb them, you learn, you're a changed individual, you can do something. But in addition, it may also indicate to others that you can do that. When you've never seen an individual in a position, you might doubt anyone. Men and women might doubt that she had the ability in that position. Education serves a very important role in many ways, certifying that the individual can do something, whether she has a law degree or a medical degree or a PhD. That doesn't mean that the individual is accepted in that position, but she's going to be more accepted. My interest in education really began when I was studying the female labor force, and I realized that one of the most important changes that brought women into the labor force was the rise of white-collar work, the rise of ordinary office and clerical work. Once women entered white-collar work and had more education, the stigma, the social norm that married women shouldn't work was, in some cases, simply reduced, but often simply eliminated. And so it became important for me to understand how it was that women in the US, for example, gained enough education to flood the labor market. Women in the labor force who were in white-collar work, the fraction doubled from 1900 to 1920, that early.
By collecting and studying data from the last 2 centuries of women's economic history through a labour economics perspective, Goldin's work has provided answers to long-standing questions and thus paved the way for new research agendas on gender. Claudia Goldin, again.
When you look at the historical data and you go back to, let's say, the early part of the 20th century, you see that a tiny fraction of women, particularly white women, said that they had an occupation. We know it's higher for black women. What about immigrant women? What about industrial homework? What about doing laundry and for other people? What about being a boarding house keeper? So then I began to look farther and further back in American history and trying to understand what women actually did that would have gotten included in gross national product. The other reason that I got involved in this was that it was even more interesting because it wasn't as if the data that we had were telling us the truth about what happened to women in the labor force. My interest in education really began when I was studying the female labor force. Education, first and foremost, gives you the skills, imparts to you. Hopefully, you absorb them. But in addition, it may also indicate to others that you can do that. Whether she has a law degree or a medical degree or a PhD, that doesn't mean that the individual is accepted in that position, but she's going to be more accepted. Once women entered white-collar work and had more education, the stigma, the social norm that married women shouldn't work was, in some cases, simply reduced, but often simply eliminated. The role of expansions in the education of women is important. But at the end of the day, we realized that the biggest barriers are that different sex couples are faced with choices in which they could keep couple equity but give up income. And if they keep couple equity, they also reduce gender inequality.
Goldin's work demonstrates that breaking gender stereotypes and lifting the remaining barriers to women's equal opportunities in the labour market can achieve a more efficient allocation of male and female talent to tasks, both in the workplace and at home, as she explains.
Work is often very greedy, and what I mean by that is that the more hours you put in, the greater your hourly wage. The degree to which the greedy job pays so much more, the different sex couple is enticed to have one of the members of the couple take the greedy job and one take the flexible job. That then means that they give up couple equity because it's generally the case that it's the woman who takes the flexible job and the man who takes the greedy job. So one part of the solution is a solution about the jobs themselves. Solutions that make jobs more flexible are solutions in which firms have more redundancy. Another part of the solution is about the world of care. Care in some countries is taken care of a lot better, and the care of young children and older and more invalid individuals is thought to be more of a community responsibility. It's mainly those two parts, which is what's happening in the world of work, what's happening in the world of care, and then there's also what's happening in the brains of men.
Now, much of Goldin's work is a deep dive into the history of the labour force, yet her approach also takes aim at contemporary work and social dynamics. In a world where work-life patterns are in flux, Goldin's insights are crucial.
We realized that the biggest barriers are that different sex couples are faced with choices in which they could keep couple equity but give up income. And if they keep couple equity, they also reduce gender inequality.
the brilliant Nobel laureate Claudia Goldin. You can read more and discover the stories of other groundbreaking women driving growth and advocating for true equality of opportunity in the winter edition of Konfekt, Monocle's elegant sister quarterly. Head to konfektmagazine.com to subscribe now. And more good news for you, we'll have another special edition of this programme for you soon here on Monocle Radio, featuring insights from two of those talents featured on Konfekt's pages, the Addition Wealth founder Anna Mahoney and business leader Ronja Anderson. In the meantime, if you want to learn more about how Nobel perspectives shape the UBS worldview and find out how the bank fosters economic equality and can help you, head over to ubs.com and search Nobel Perspectives. If you'd like to listen again or find out more about Monocle, head to monocle.com. This is The Bulletin with UBS on Monocle Radio. I'm Tom Edwards. Thanks for listening.